And the second question is kind of sticking with a transfer theme now. And this has been talked about a lot by a lot of people and saying, I don't like where the game is going. And you'll know all the rhetoric around this. And probably it focuses around, Alexander Isak and making his move. And there's an article in The Athletic, and I know you did it on YouTube, talked about how we've got to this point all the way through. The thing I want to sort of start with this now about, do players have to force it? You think of Alexander Isak saying, well, I had an agreement with that. You think of Harry Kane. Do you remember we did that little playing golf with Gary Neville and said Daniel Levy and me had a gentleman's agreement? I mean, it's clauses now. Gentlemen's agreements, quote unquote, are worthless when it comes to transfers, aren't they?
Yeah, I think players and agents have got to get wise to that now, because clubs will not stick to those. If it's not written down and signed, then you will, it is ultimately worthless, because clubs will pull every excuse they can out the book, like you can't find a replacement and all these things, and the market's not good enough at the moment to find someone who can come in, and all these kind of excuses. So players really shouldn't be making gentlemen's agreements. I think Isak's a funny one as well. I think he made a mistake in signing a 6-year contract when he went there. I think that was particularly as he clearly saw it as a stepping stone. You're not telling me that Newcastle would have said, we're not signing you unless you sign a 6-year contract. They would have gone to 5. So I think that was a poor decision. And it is one of the reasons I remember when these links first kind of surfaced, I was quite sceptical about them, because I just couldn't see how, with that contractual situation, he would get out of there, really. And particularly because Newcastle's hand had been strengthened by winning a trophy, Champions League qualification. It looked a really difficult deal to do. What I kind of underestimated, I think, was the extent to which he would push his way out the door, make it completely untenable that he could play for the club again. Not something I kind of expected to really happen, really. So I kind of judged that wrong. But as you say, I think it's a lesson to players about contract length. Harry Kane made a similar mistake at Tottenham, actually signing a 6-year deal, I believe. It's a lesson about that. It's a lesson about not accepting promises behind closed doors about you being able to depart. You have to get that stuff written down and release clauses inserted. That's an absolute must. So, maybe players will learn from that one, and maybe someone like a Mark Guehi will have learned a completely different lesson as well. So it's, I think agents should be taking note from what's happened this summer.
Yeah, I do wonder if it does just sort of change the landscape, because, as you said, Mark Guehi behaves perfectly, says all the right things. Even plays for Palace, doesn't he, in that Sunday evening game as well, does everything that you should do. And then you think of, obviously, the players that we've just talked about there. But even Nicholas Jackson, is that the example of Gaze is called off last minute, Jackson's is kind of called off, but he goes, I'm not moving, I'm staying on the tarmac in Munich, I'm not going home, and it kind of like forces it. It's like, it just sets that precedent, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is it. The players, when they aren't wanted by the clubs, are treated appallingly. Like Nicholas Jackson, an absolutely perfect example of that. You look at the bomb squad at Manchester United, the ones that they wanted to kick out the door, how Marcus Rashford, who, has been, outside of probably Bruno Fernandes, the best Manchester United player of the last 10 years, at the point at which they decided his wages were untenable, they've treated him horrendously. So, it's a business when fans want it to be and clubs want it to be, and then it's an emotional pursuit where we should all love the team we represent and support, or whatever, when it suits them. So it's just a nonsense, isn't it? I'm pretty sure Newcastle will have been kicking players out the door this summer who they didn't want. I'm pretty sure they won't have felt that Johan Wissa's behaviour was disgraceful, and yet you've got and then the converse to that, you've got Mark Guehi doing all the right things, as you say, acting so classily, and his reward for that is to be denied his dream move to Liverpool. It's just ridiculous, and so much hypocrisy knocking about. And I think the best thing we can do is to not get dragged into it and kind of supporting the clubs we support or write about or whatever in their actions around this. It's just recognising it all for what it is as a whole, really, which is, just an absolutely ruthless, dirty business at times. And I felt for Mark Guehi with the way that one played out, because what more could he have done? And what I think is the most frustrating aspect of this, I also sympathise, by the way, with Oliver Glasner's stance. Like, why should he have his squad weakened. He's absolutely right. That's not fair to do to him. But what will be amusing is when Amorim gets sacked in 3 months' time and Oliver Glasner has put his foot down about this, he will go to Manchester United. You just watch this happen. They will want another 3 at the back manager. He's the best in the business at the moment. And he will go to Manchester United, leaving Mark Guehi behind him. And again, it will be another lesson for everyone of how short-term and ruthless and selfish this entire business is.
And I've got to ask you this, it's a bit aside from it, but did you see that bit in the Sammy Mockball article for the BBC on this, where Steve Parish wasn't available until 6 p.m. because he was doing a Soho spin class in Soho? Did you clock that one as well?
Yeah, and again, kind of teaches you about the amateurishness still that is all the way through sport. Any sport I've ever covered, really, you find this, because as much as it's a business and a multi-million-pound business, it's a game at the end of the day, and still there's elements of how serious it's treated. That kind of leak through there, and you hear stories like that. And on transfer deadline day, for him to be doing that and thinking, just move your spin class till the next day. I'm sure that's absolutely possible. When there's deals and people's futures are at stake, and the future of your manager who's brought you the club's first ever major trophy, and all these things are up in the air. And it just kind of tells a story, doesn't it, really, of how serious they all take it. And it's why you see clubs consistently making bad decisions, is because of leadership like that. And that maybe a little bit unfair on Palace, who've been incredibly well run in recent times. But that was if that reporting is accurate, it's a pretty poor moment, really, wasn't it?
Doesn't really reflect well. And this is when we're talking about players having to force it now. Have we missed something? Like, I know fax machines have gone. Have transfer requests gone? Because we've seen an Isak statement, then we've seen a Visser statement, like social media. A transfer request a thing of the past a little bit now.
Yeah, it kind of seems it, because people don't want to give up the loyalty, although I believe Isak did give up a fairly significant chunk there that Newcastle ended up saving on to get it through, though it wouldn't have been all of his loyalty bonus, that's for sure, because that would have been a really significant amount of money. But it seems like players aren't seeing that as an option now, because they refuse to give up that money. So, maybe that would grease the wheels of some of these transfers a little bit easier, but nobody seems to want to go there. So, I think that maybe they're a thing of the past.
Does seem to have drifted on that way. And then, as you say, because it can be sort of tribal balance and, just looking at it from one lens. I mean, Ibu Konate's within it his last year. If we're saying it both ways and, that players have to force it, we're probably not in too, right of mind, and obviously want this to happen, to complain too much if he does run the contract down, are we?
No, exactly. And I think this is driving this contract situation. Some of the way over the top criticism we've seen, like, why I don't understand. Maybe it's just kind of seeing this as a job, and I absolutely love football. Don't get me wrong. So it's not like I'm kind of emotionally detached, but seeing it through the lens of a job and being close to the people who are in it. I just don't think people need to be this emotional about situations like this. Like, Konate wants the best possible contract for himself coming into his peak years. Liverpool want to pay as little as they can for as good a performances as they can get from him. It's a negotiation. They may reach an agreement on that. They may not. He may have other deals on the table that look really attractive to go and live elsewhere, to go and win another league, to go and perhaps earn more money elsewhere. That is absolutely fine. And he's not antagonising fans in any way. He's not, he's not letting anybody down. He's not a local lad either. So I just don't understand. This may or may not resolve itself, but Liverpool are pretty fine with it resolving itself in a way where if he doesn't sign a new contract this season, then he goes on a free. So what? We're absolutely fine with that. We're willing to take that risk to keep some stability this season. The player, I know he had a couple of poor performances to start the season, as I say, but they're not a sniff about his professionalism or his mind being elsewhere, anything like that. And it might not work out the way that everybody wants it to, but it's fine. It's football. Everybody's got to make the best decision for themselves. And like I say, I don't think he's antagonising fans. I don't think he's doing this like Trent Alexander-Arnold was, or, like I say, he's not the local lad. So it's just a fine situation that I don't think anybody has to get too kind of het up about and maybe kind of lose their mind. If he does go at the end of this season on a free transfer, I still think he should go with everybody's blessing, because he's been a phenomenal player for Liverpool, and the contract, he just couldn't get there. And I don't think his demands are outrageous. It's just slightly above maybe where Liverpool want to go at the moment. And by the way, it could still be resolved. There's plenty of time left. We saw that with Van Dijk. We saw it with Salah. So yeah, I just think, tensions need to be to kind of simmer down a little bit around this situation, and particularly in light of everything else we've seen in the transfer market.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that resolves itself one way or the other. But I suppose then the big decision, if you were a player or if you're an agent, it's got to be written down now. Gentlemen's agreements are things of the past, and if you want the move, you may just have to force it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think hopefully we don't have to see more of the forcing, because no matter what you say, and even though it works in Liverpool's benefit in this situation, it is unsavoury, isn't it? We don't really necessarily. It's a good story to cover, and it's fun in that sense. But it's you don't need to see clubs at war and players at war with the clubs, and kind of breaking that bond that they've had with fans, because now Newcastle fans absolutely hate Isak, and it's kind of like, well, he should have been a big part of their history and absolutely loved by supporters. So that's a real shame. But it's all on the agent not getting that kind of clause or anything, and not getting anything written down. I think it's also partly on Newcastle being so poorly run, by the way. They do not escape blame for this. The kind of, the gap at the top that's been there has allowed this to fester, and the disconnect between kind of Eddie Howe and the ownership over how they would approach this situation. That's not been helpful at all. But yeah, you don't really want to see this kind of going on. So people need to get this stuff written down, and need to have agreements in place, and maybe clubs need to be better run as well. In the case of maybe Crystal Palace and Newcastle this summer. But it's not something you enjoy seeing as someone who loves football.
Indeed, yeah. Transfer requests, media statements, and spin clatters in Soho. I didn't think we'd be talking about, but there we go. And